My 8-year-old son really wants to fix sidewalks when he grows up. Or wreck them, it doesn't matter, as long as he gets to play outside with power tools. And I tell him, you can, if that's what you want to do. Never once, when he said that, have I knelt down beside him and said, see there, that black bird on the wire? Be like him. Sit back all day. Get yourself a good view. When you see someone in trouble, wait till they give up, then swoop down and tear a piece out of them. Because if I said that, he'd go into finance. And yet, Jesus says this thing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. To which his first audience must have answered, does God offer choices other than what he feeds the ravens? Because I'm on a low carcass and garbage diet right now. It's a heart condition. I'm in deep Deuteronomy. It's one of the great riddles of the gospel. How is a raven like a role model? Ravens may know something we don't know about living in God's kingdom. They seem to have understood it better than Jesus' own disciples, but I just see scavengers picking at refuse and carrion. And when I see the guys on the highway jabbing at trash and roadkill in bright orange uniforms, I never point to them and say, hey kids, look, you want to be like one of them when you grow up? As an American, I should want my children to grow up and get rich. I don't mean steak tartare rich, I mean beef jerky rich. Like to have so much stored up that they can look around one day and say, what are we going to do with all this jerky? I know, we'll tear down our storage units and build bigger ones. Or just rent more storage units. And then we'll kick back with wine coolers, eat this jerky, and enjoy ourselves. The problem is, Jesus told this parable about a guy just like that. And in the story, God came down and said, you fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and all this stuff you've hoarded, who will get it now? Jesus doesn't tell us the guy's response in the parable, but it was probably something like, wow, God, I mean, you kill everyone eventually, but why do you have to call me a fool too? I'm just being fiscally responsible here. Now that prodigal son kid, he was a fool. I planned for the future. I'm Jewish. What do you want? Anyway, we don't find out what the guy said, and obviously his being Jewish had nothing to do with it. Contrary to Christian doctrine, no, God is not an anti-Semite. It was food storage that was the problem. Jesus wants us to consider the raven who never owns more than his beak and belly can carry, and this guy with his magnificent stash has a heart attack at his retirement party because he's been stockpiling food. What was the rich fool's crime? One clue is that Jesus calls him, quote, a rich man. There are only 3 rich man parables in Luke's gospel. One gets swindled and the other 2 die. Rich didn't mean you owned your home. The father of the prodigal son was a man, not a rich man. Rich in first century Galilee meant real estate, owning your own home, and investment properties, other homes you could turn into plantations. And with your surplus capital, you'd offer crooked mortgages to homeowners, slam them with blitzkrieg interest rate hikes, foreclose, and refit their property for cash crops. Balzac said, behind every great fortune there is a crime, and Jesus would have agreed. In the book of Genesis, a plantation farmer named Cain killed his cowboy brother Abel, and instead of dropping the biblical wrath on him, God gives him this badass gangster tattoo. Now Cain is thinking, I've just committed the first murder, my own brother. Where do you go from here? Hip-hop stardom was within his grasp, but instead he went and built the first city. Why? We think city and we think New York, and there's 1,000 reasons a criminal would want to build it. But the earliest cities were more like medieval castles, a block with walls around it, and the heart of the city was the silo, the grain storage. Cain was a farmer. He built the city to store grain. But of course, you don't grow grain in a city. You extort it from the surrounding farmers. You use threats, like the mafia. Hey, it'd sure be too bad if something happened to your fields, your house, your children. You need protection. Give me half, and I'll make sure no one around here messes with you. And if invaders come, you can hide out behind these walls of mine. Of course, the real reason you need those walls is to protect you from the farmers themselves, who outnumber you 100 to 1. And when invaders come, you pull up the drawbridge. Farmers show up and you say, what promise? You should have got that in writing. The city is a human invention, a tool to store food and protect consumers from producers. A food storage. That was what got the rich man killed in this parable. These days, the danger of food storage is chemical preservatives, which really will end your retirement, necessitating what I call the junk food prayer. Body, forgive me for this crap you are about to receive. I know not what I chew. But that wasn't the Galilean rich man's problem. He was just looking out for himself, planning ahead. He was too big to fail, recession-proof, well insured against drought and famine. When he said to himself, "You've got plenty of good things stored up, relax," it was a declaration of independence. Independence from God. Because when you've got your lifetime supply of daily bread, what do you need God for anymore? Or as Daniel Quinn said in his book Ishmael, when you've got more food than you need, then the gods have no power over you. But that doesn't make you free. That rich man in the story, all his stuff started telling him how to live. Tear down your barns and build bigger ones. The things he owned ended up owning him. And then comes God, saying, "Hey, remember me? Creator of the world, splitter of the sea, and that loan I made to you called life? Well, here's a foreclosure notice inscribed on the tablet of your heart. Matter of fact, my next act of creation is a word for people like you. Deadbeat. Yeah, I like that. Deadbeat. Thus saith the Lord." Now we're getting somewhere, considering the rich fool and the raven. Ravens are scavengers, but they don't fly around with shopping carts, and they don't build vaults to hold their stuff. They just borrow what they need to get by. You could say they wing it, huh? If you're a bird, part of what you want to do is fly. And God didn't design your wings to carry more than your own body and one meal. If ravens had a prayer, it would be, "Give us this day our daily decaying dead." Because a raven who owns an elephant carcass wouldn't be able to achieve liftoff with it. That's a scientific fact. I had to do some research. Ravens are really fascinating birds. Interesting to study, I mean, not when they're gathering at your darkest hour. I wonder how Jesus felt about the ravens who came around while he was hanging on the cross. If he forgave them when they looked at him as if to say, "Hi there. Yeah, we never have to ask what are we to eat because Rome gives us dinner on a stick 30 times a day. We've got this dead and circuses agreement going with the empire. We're getting too fat to fly anymore, but we don't care as long as you render unto Caesar and Caesar renders unto us." Yeah, scavengers love empires. But scavenger is such an ugly word. We could say God made ravens to be janitors, custodians of creation. As my dad used to say from his Boy Scout days, they leave the campsite cleaner than they found it. That God designed the raven as a helper in keeping creation in balance is easy to hear and believe. It gets harder to believe that God also created people to help in keeping creation balanced. That doesn't mean that God made all of the rest of creation to balance out humanity on a 10,000-year raging bender. And the job that God created us to do, maybe it wasn't something as lofty as world dominators. And history has proven we're definitely not meant to be God's police force or army. Maybe we were intended for something more humble. When I was a child, there was a song we used to sing called "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands." And then I grew up into a much taller child, and I've been taught that it's humanity's manifest destiny to take the whole world into our hands, to take control and determine what's a plant and what's a weed, what's a pet and what's a pest, what's treasure and what's trash. And any plant, animal, person that gets in the way, eliminate them. And to do this in the name of God, as if God wasn't strong enough to finish the job of creation, as if God wasn't wise enough to decide what to do with it. But that song, "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands," I'd like to think that that will be passed down to the next generation of little summer campers, and maybe they'll be able to feel its meaning more deeply than we have. Jesus said, "Foxes have dens, and the birds of the air have nests, but the child of humanity has nowhere to lay his head." And I'm sure you can interpret that on all sorts of metaphysical or soteriological levels, but it's also a literal fact. Every creature in nature can find a place to lie down. Only humanity has to deal with homelessness. Of course, A fox might return to his hole at the end of the day and find another fox there, and if they're not feeling foxy about it, a scuffle might ensue. And a bird might build a perfectly fine nest, then spend winter in Florida and return to find it gone. But strangely, after millions of years, birds have not yet invented mortgages and leases and accounts and accountants and lines of credit and careers. We know this because if they had, then they'd be coming home after a long day's grind and saying, "What is this, a pile of twigs? I don't spend 40 hours a week flipping fried worms so I can come home to a heap like this. And if Chick Protective Services sees this, I'm going to end up in a cage." And the neighboring fox said, "Yeah, if they saw the hole I raised my kids in, they'd have my tail for it." Then the neighboring human opens a window and says, "Keep it down. You're on my land, and I'm trying to get some sleep." Only the person doesn't speak fox or bird, so they say it with a shotgun. In a way, we can relate to that homeowner getting territorial because they do have to deal with mortgages and leases and accounts and accountants and lines of credit and careers. They have to work so much harder than the fox and the bird because they do want to have the same home all the time with full legal recourse against any trespassers. And by legal recourse, I mean the shotgun. Foxes have holes, birds have nests, but we've got private property. Those foxes are all crazy, and not crazy like a fox either. I mean nuts, and the birds are cuckoo. Only the human being can own land. Elizabeth and I own a house. We went to a bank with a full report of every single number we've ever come into contact with. In my case, mostly zeros, and negatives that were mercilessly counted as zeros. And we signed some papers, and now we own a house. And the bank owns us. And if we miss a payment, then the bank will own the house. And if we skip town, the bank would own us and the house. The bank wouldn't settle for our firstborn child. Actually, the bank would probably give us 20 grand not to have to take our child. But that fox and that bird counting on God for everything, who needs a benevolent God when you've got a document of indecipherable digits from Bank of America? Foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the child of humanity has nowhere to lay his head. Of course, there was a time when the human species were fine neighbors with the fox and the bird. Archaeologists are finding that for 3 million years, more than 99% of humanity's time on Earth, not only did we not own land, we were migratory. Free-range nomads with no mortgages, no houses, no fences, and the child of humanity could lay his head anywhere. It wasn't until about 10,000 years ago that a handful of people built permanent residences, put fences around them, and invented what we know as homes. But twins were born that day. In the same instant as homes, they also invented what we know as homelessness. For 10,000 years now, the rash of fences has spread across the planet, claiming more acres each day until there won't be an inch of the earth on which a free-range vagabond like Jesus could lay his head without either signing a lease or being a trespasser. And God help him if he trespassed in shotgun land. The foxes and birds don't envy us. They cock their heads and wonder why we work so hard to get for ourselves and deny to others what they have for free. But one of these days, one of these generations, the children of humanity will walk out of their oppressive houses, climb over their divisive fences, leaving behind the distinction between haves and have-nots, and the fox and the bird will say to the human children, "Welcome home." Thank you. This is Animal Magic. This has been a chapter of a book called Chaos that I wrote, I don't know, like over a decade ago. And but I still like it pretty good. And thank you for listening. And you can find this book, I don't know, in the place where you find books. Thank you.